Hello everyone. Today we're going to examine and learn about the cardiovascular system. In this podcast, which will be part 1, we will focus on the heart, its vessels and structure. Make sure you have your diagram of the heart or any other diagrams that I have provided for you, as well as the list of words for understanding. Pause if you need to. Once you have what you need, we can go ahead and get started. Okay, all this information you can find in your textbook in Chapter 15, starting on page 559. Let's start out with our words list. Our first word is angio, which is a vessel, also known as, there's a chemical called angiotensin that constricts the blood vessels. Arteries are large blood vessels and can withstand strong forces, and they are immediately after the heart. Arterioles are small blood vessels that connect to the arteries. Capillaries are the smallest vessels, site of nutrients, electrolyte, gas, and waste exchange. Venules converge into veins that return blood to the heart. The atria are the top left and right hollow chambers of the heart. The ventricles are the bottom left and right chambers of the heart. The pericardium, or pericardial sac, is a protective outer covering of the heart. The epicardium, or the outermost layer adjacent to the pericardium, protects the heart by reducing friction. Also, the myocardium, which is the middle layer, contains cardiac muscle, pumps blood, and pumps blood out of the heart chambers. The endocardium is the inner layer, and it contains some blood vessels and cardiac muscle fibers called the Purkinje fibers. Atrioventricular orifice is an opening between the atria and its corresponding ventricles. It helps both chambers communicate, so to speak. The tricuspid valve, tri meaning 3, contains 3 cusps. It guards the atrioventricular orifice between the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it moves blood from the right atria to the right ventricle and prevents it from backflowing back into the atrium. Pulmonary valve, pulm for lungs, of course, consists of 3 cusps also. It opens as the right ventricle contracts. This valve closes so there is no backflow of blood into the right ventricle. Blood comes from the lungs, pulmonary, to the left atrium. The mitral valve is the valve that guards the left atria and the left ventricle. It consists of 2 leaflets, and it is shaped like what's called a mitre, which is a type of headpiece, hence the name mitral valve. It's also called the bicuspid valve, and it prevents backflow of blood from the left atrium to the left ventricle. I've also provided other resources for you that you can look up at your leisure time. One in particular is on innerbody.com, and there's a 2D interaction where you can tap on the image and learn more about that section of the heart. So I definitely recommend that you try to use that. So now I want you to pause, and I want you to look at your chart of your heart that does not have the names on it, and see how you do in locating different parts of the heart. Also, I'd like for you to take a moment to review this list again of words, and then try to remember them without looking at them. So go ahead and pause now. So how did you do? Don't worry if you didn't remember all or as many as that you would like to remember, because just like any other task, it takes practice. I suggest that you review the list and the diagram from time to time in order to get familiar with it. Okay, so let's get started. First, let's take a look at the blood transport diagram, and we will focus on the heart and its structures itself. First, the cardiovascular system is an intricate, complex system that supports life. The system consists of the heart itself pumping 7,000 liters of blood throughout the body each day. Because of the force created by the contraction of the heart, the blood first must flow through large vessels that can withstand the pressure, and these are arteries. As the force of blood decreases, smaller vessels are okay. And they are the arterioles, and those are immediately after the arteries. The next connection is to the capillaries. The capillaries are very important because they are the site of nutrient, electrolyte, blood gas, and waste exchange. From the capillaries, we get the venules, which in turn converge to the veins. The function of the veins is returning the blood to the heart, thereby completing the cardiovascular circuit, or a closed blood circulation system. I suggest you hang on to these diagrams of the circulation system and review them as often as you can, because knowing this will help you have a basis for getting to know diseases and functions of the heart later. Now, let's focus on our heart diagram. You can pause here and grab it if you don't already have it in front of you, then return and we'll discuss it. So let's take a look at our heart diagram. The heart itself is shaped, it's somewhat like a cone. Take your hand and make a fist, and turn the fist upward so that the knuckle of the thumb is pointing up. This is kind of a good representation of the shape of the heart. The size of the heart can vary with the size of the body, but it generally is 14 centimeters long and 9 centimeters wide, or 5.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So the heart, although it's relatively small, is a powerful, powerful structure in the body. The bottom of the heart attaches to several large blood vessels and rests just beneath the second rib. The heart is covered by a thin sac called the pericardium, which extends into the large blood vessels attached to the heart. This sac acts as a protective covering of the heart and is made up of almost entirely of connective tissue. Within the pericardial sac are layers of connective tissue, of which a small volume of serous blood is contained. This fluid helps to prevent and reduce friction, which can occur as the heart moves or pumps. The heart also has 3 other layers within it. The epicardium, which is the outer layer closest to the pericardium, and it protects the heart by also reducing friction. This is a serous membrane that is covered by epithelium, and it includes capillaries and nerve fibers. It also contains fat, and this fat provides blood flow through the myocardium, which is the middle layer. The myocardium is a thick layer that contains cardiac muscle tissue and is responsible for pumping blood out of the heart. After this layer is the inner layer, or the endocardium, and it consists of connective tissue, blood vessels, specialized cardiac muscle fibers, which are called Purkinje fibers, which are part of the cardiac conduction system, and we will discuss those at a later date. The endothelium lines all the heart chambers and covers its structure. It is continuous, and the inner lining of the blood vessels covers the inner lining of the blood vessels attached to the heart. The heart is divided into 4 hollow chambers, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. The 2 upper chambers are the atria, and they receive blood returning to the heart. The 2 lower chambers are the ventricles, and their function is to force blood out of the heart, and the arteries are attached to these. An interatrial septum separates the atriums, and an intraventricular septum separates the ventricles, and we'll discuss those again later at a later date. Each atria communicates, so to speak, with its corresponding ventricle. So the left atrium with the left ventricle, the right atrium with the right ventricle. And this communication occurs through a structure that's called the atrioventricular orifice. The atrioventricular the atrium receives blood from 2 large veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which both return the oxygenated blood from the body to the heart. Another vessel called the coronary sinus also drains blood into the right atrium from the myocardium, a larger part of the heart. A large valve called the tricuspid valve guards the atrioventricular orifice. It is made of 3 cusps or leaflets. The tricuspid valve allows blood flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle and prevents the blood from flowing back into the opposite direction. The pulmonary valve also consists of 3 cusps. The right ventricle contracts this valve, simultaneously opening, and when the ventricle releases, it closes to prevent backflow of blood into the right ventricle. The mitral valve guards blood flow through the atrioventricular orifice of the left atrium into the left ventricle. This valve helps to prevent blood flowing in the opposite direction, back into the atrium. The last main valve is the aortic valve, which lives at the back of the aorta. This valve transports blood from the left ventricle as it contracts. When the ventricle relaxes, this valve closes to prevent backflow of blood